Please be seated. Well, have you ever had the experience where you say something, and as the words come out of your mouth, you wish that you could reach out and take them back? Anyone? I have that experience quite frequently. Usually it comes from the practice of speaking before I think. Either I jump into a conversation without really knowing actually what was being talked about, or I just fire off any random phrase or saying in nothing but a vain attempt to make myself seem brilliant and insightful. Usually the results are quite disastrous. In the gospel reading, Peter does the very same thing, and the results are quite disastrous. Peter says something, I'm sure, that as soon as he said it, he probably wished he could take back. It's inappropriate, it's inane, it's mistaken. Peter fires off a rebuke to Jesus that does nothing but highlight his own misunderstandings. A misunderstanding about the nature of the kingdom of God and what Jesus is there to do. A misunderstanding about what it means to follow Jesus. And so in the season of Lent, and in light of this gospel reading, we are asked to take a hard look at ourselves and see if our own voice is sometimes found within the words of Peter. If you wish to follow along, I invite you to pick up your pew Bibles and turn to Mark chapter 8. Mark is the second gospel, Matthew, then Mark, and then chapter 8 in the New Testament. So to put things a little bit in context, Mark chapter 8 is about the middle of the Gospel of Mark. There are 16 chapters, chapter 8's in the middle. And so it's not insignificant that in this center of the Gospel, you have quite a grand event. Just before our reading, Jesus asks the disciples, "Who do people say that I am, and who do you say that I am?" Peter responds, "You are the Christ." That term Christ, or Messiah as it would have been in Hebrew, is a very loaded term, and it brings a whole lot of expectations to the table. Kingly rule, power, prestige, an end to Roman tyranny, that was all loaded within that term, which is great and fine and good, except that God's plan of redemption was never politically based. It was never setting up a new political kingdom. So our reading begins at verse 31, where Jesus begins to teach them about what the Son of Man is to do, what the Messiah is to do. You have this great picture where Jesus asks, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "You are the Christ." And Jesus says, "Great, this is what that means. The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. He must be killed and after 3 days rise again." Jesus speaks openly and plainly about this. There's no parables, there's no stories, there's no flowery language. He just lays it on the table. And notice his use of the word must. The Son of Man must suffer. The Son of Man must be killed. The road to redemption, the road to forgiveness, the road to salvation, the road in which the kingdom of God is inaugurated in this world is the way of the cross. As we're probably aware, everything that Jesus says in this verse happens. But of course, when Jesus says all this stuff, Peter doesn't want to hear it. He actually kind of stops listening after Jesus says the word killed. And if we're honest, it probably makes sense. After all, he's just confessed, and he's been affirmed in that confession that Jesus is the Messiah, the anointed one, the one of God to come and usher in God's kingdom. And because Peter had some sort of political understanding and social understanding of what that meant, when Jesus started talking about suffering and death, Peter probably felt, well, Jesus just doesn't understand the job description. So what does he do? He rebukes him. The word rebuke is important. It's the same word that Jesus uses when he rebukes demons and, the waves and Pharisees and earthly powers. The word means to put someone in their rightful place, under the authority and the power of one who is greater than they are. By rebuking Jesus, Peter is saying, Jesus, you don't understand your mission, and I will instruct you in it. In some sense, Peter is placing himself as an authority over God's kingdom and over Jesus. Now, before we give Peter a complete bad rap, we need to stop and ask ourselves, how often, sometimes, do we try to muscle Jesus into some box of comfort that we would like him to fit into? How often do we force Jesus to follow our leading, to serve our understandings or our wishes? It's very easy to do. I think we do it when we focus on the words of love and grace of Jesus, but not on his words of challenge or his words of rebuke. I had a friend who said, I like the teachings of Jesus, except when he talks about God. Well, you can't take one without the other. Maybe we try to keep Jesus out of various aspects of our life. We try to compartmentalize our life. There is this side, and our spiritual life, our religious life, our life with Jesus, well, that's over off here. When we do things like that, we set ourselves up as adversaries to the way of Jesus in this world, and the way of Jesus in our life. Jesus rebukes Peter, get behind me, Satan. Get behind me, adversary, tempter. In Peter's rebuke of Jesus, he was essentially placing himself before Jesus and saying, follow my lead, I'll tell you what to do. So Jesus says, no, you get behind me and you follow my lead. Because Peter's response was based solely on his fallible understanding and not on humble acceptance and humble faith. You don't have in mind, says Jesus, the things of God. You only have in mind the way of the world, the things of the world, human things. We cannot approach Jesus in a way that attempts to figure Jesus out in reference to human boxes and categories that we want him to fit into. We have to come not seeking our own will or our own glory, but laying all that aside and placing it at the feet of Jesus. Jesus is clear. The way of Jesus is the way of the cross. It is a way that also Jesus' followers must walk as well. For Peter, in misunderstanding the way of the kingdom of God, the way of the cross that Jesus must walk, he misunderstands the way that he must follow in. It is out of his own journey to the cross that Jesus calls everybody. If anyone would come after me, they must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. We follow in the path of Jesus, where he directs, where he guides, where he leads. The annual clergy conference, or clergy retreat, is held in Sanctum Retreat Center, which is up near Caroline, Alberta. It's this wonderful place, nestled kind of in the woods, and we go there every year, so I was there at the beginning of February for our clergy retreat. On this retreat, I decided to walk the Stations of the Cross. They have this path of the Stations of the Cross that lead throughout the woods all along. And so if you remember, the beginning of February, there was quite a lot of snow on the ground, particularly up in Caroline and in this retreat center. So as I walked the Stations of the Cross, some of it were kind of right within the woods, so it was fine there. But the path would kind of jettison out of the woods into this clearing as you would walk from station to station.